Hello, my name is David Gibbons. I am a librarian at Brown University. And I wrote this little introduction, which none of my esteemed panelists have heard, on the airplane. So it's gonna, I've only reread it a couple of times. I think I got out most of the swear words, but you may hear one. One may come across. The title for this presentation comes from a note I wrote a bunch of years ago in a notebook at a library conference, much like this one, while listening to someone present on ways to let the data be the decider about what should or shouldn't make it into an academic library's collection. I thought about what the person was saying and wrote, but what does the quant believe? Because I had always seen the collection, the idea of collecting, really, as driven by a different impulse, right? A deeper one that a pure numbers game couldn't satisfy. So, to be sure, in our game there's an element of giving the people what they want, but I was always of the mind, and not always consciously, that the impulse for libraries and librarians to choose stuff to line the shelves of their big buildings had an ethical or philosophical slant that opened out and was inclusive and inquisitive and, well, hopeful, maybe a higher impulse. As important, as I'm sure you're thinking, the question I have often had is, am I just being simple-minded and maybe a little naive? Was the collection always waiting for the computer to make its way to our desktop so we could stop flailing about with questions about the right stuff to be bringing into the big buildings and the right stuff to be holding on to and making available? Was there ever serendipity and magic in the stuff we housed? If there was, is it gone? Airplane thoughts, folks, airplane thoughts. I will let the folks assembled here introduce themselves, and then we'll get started with the questions.
I have the mic. So my name is Emma Heat. I'm currently the Associate Dean of Collections and Administrative Services at Loyola University Chicago. So largish, Jesuit, undergraduate teaching focused. Before that, I was at the Duke University Medical Center, and I was in charge of all collections there, and that was purely a numbers game, and it was wonderful. The security of just those numbers, and when someone with a Nobel Prize tried to yell at me, I'd be like, the data, and they'd be like, so yeah, and now it's a very different life. So that, I guess, is my backstory as I sit here.
Thanks, Emma. My name is Ana Noriega. I'm at the Colby Library, which is in Maine. Maine is part of the United States, if you didn't know. Part of a consortium, Colby Bates Bowdoin. I've been there for 10 years, and for many years, but I won't say how many. Before that, I've worked at public libraries, the Brooklyn Public, but I only lasted 1 year, so I should not keep mentioning it. And then also FIT Library, which is still my favorite place in the world. I've been doing collections for a long time, and I've seen, as initially a serials cataloger, the changes in quantification methods and methodologies.
I think I can use this one. Oh, I gave us two. Great. Okay, and I'm Sarah Frizzetting. I'm the Associate Director for Acquisitions and Collection Strategies at Stanford University. So I'm representing the research-intensive university, and in thinking about my background, I'm not one who often identifies myself as a librarian. That gets me into trouble a lot sometimes with my colleagues, but I always want to take sort of that business approach to just getting things done and getting things here. So I'm also joking with my colleagues that I think I'm here as the non-assessment person and the practical, how can we just get stuff perspective.
Great, thank you all. Let's get started with the questions. Question 1. To your mind, are there inherent limitations to a data-driven approach to library print collecting? And what are some of those limitations?
Yeah. I will lead us out. So as I said before, when I was at Duke and medical and I used numbers for everything, There were a few things that I would make exceptions for, and those tended to be the fuzzier, right, sciences. So community health, psychology, sort of family health, the things that weren't huge publishing areas for us and weren't sort of focuses of our research. Because it could be easy to let them go and the numbers never supported them. And so for me, that was one of our limitations with a data-driven model. Now I feel like at Loyola, it's like everything can be an exception. And so when we have a new, we have a new school or a new program, and I'm like, I don't really know what to buy to support them yet because I don't have that data. So having to do all that groundwork from scratch and just sort of seeing where the chips fall can be challenging.
Well, I use data somewhat in, I think if we're talking about books specifically, at a liberal arts college, everything is an exception and everything is wonderful and we love it all. Please tell us what you want us to buy. We'll buy 4 copies each. The problem with that is that you then end up with a collection that does not fit in the physical library. And so you build a storage facility, somebody writes a nasty article about your library and then you fill the facility up in 5 years, not the 25 that were expected. So at that point, I do feel like a quantitative approach would be helpful. But just to add to the fun mix at the Liberal Arts College, where I am, upwards of 60% of our physical holdings have shared collection commitments.
My thinking about data is, what is data? Like, and how much time, oh, Robin's waving, can you not hear? Oh, Robin can't hear. What if I do this? Is this better? Virginia says yes. Okay, great, thank you, friends. So yeah, like what is data? Like what are we talking about when we're talking about data-driven collections? Are we talking about metrics like circulation? Are we talking about the metadata that comes with books that helps us to understand like what category this thing should go in? And we have a philosophy department, we want philosophy books. What does that mean in terms of LC classification, right? Like what are we talking about when we talk about data? And I think that our data is so imperfect in so many ways that if we wanted to really use it, we would have to spend so much time creating better data in order to use that data, right? And so often I feel like we don't end up doing that, and we make a lot of default decisions. And the effect of those kind of default decisions are, try as we might with our wonderful profiles, we're all still getting like every Rutledge book. And is that a data-driven decision? Like even if we've tried to go through our profile and be so specific, at some point it ends up failing because of a lack of actually really good data to make those decisions. So I think that's the limitation.
Got it. I guess follow-up question, probably for the 3 of you. Is there no way to effectively collect a collection in this day and age? And I guess I'm asking that, 100 years ago, there were a lot fewer books produced than there are today. And one of the things that the digital revolution brought about was not just an ease in getting books, but an ease in making books, right? And so now there are more books than ever. You and I could make books and sell them. And perhaps some of you out there too. And so I guess this may be putting the cart before the horse, maybe slightly, but is there no way to do it well? That's a question I've asked. I've been working collections for decades. And I've asked myself that question many times. Is there no way to do it well?
I'll describe my utopian vision.
Yeah.
Well, so I've worked on the CCLP project, the NISO IMLS funded grant. I think ideally, and so my library isn't poor, but we are by no means wealthy. And so we don't buy probably as much as we could or should to support everything that goes on. I would love to see a vision of the collective collection where we're all ensuring, and when I say all, I don't just mean Ivy's Plus, or I don't just mean the
Yeah.
big, rich ARL libraries. I mean, everybody can contribute, where we're ensuring that collection and preservation and sort of know what everyone else has. Even if someone was just giving me a list once a month, like buy these things, keep them forever, and it's only like 20 bucks, right? Like I can afford that.
I think the main thing that is in my mind, I'll just put it this way. When the technical services departments were decimated in the 90s, you know, I have a friend at work who collects the stamps that they used when they worked a position that no longer exists, and they kept going from position to position. So I said, Max, what are these? Well, these represent all the jobs that no longer exist. And at first, you know, I thought it was hilarious and charming. But thinking about it, it's like, yes, I don't have, data can tell me some things, but I have to think of the questions. And when I do, I don't have all the expertise that I need. I'm not a cataloger anymore. I haven't been for some time. I wish that there was more appreciation in terms of creating collections for the metadata. That is a critical component. And the systems that are being created don't necessarily have the field choices that we need or want. The other thing is, if you're collecting for people that you think exist today, that's probably not the right way. You have to think ahead, 3 steps, and imagine that you live in a world with people who don't think or look like you. The profession suffers incredibly in collections as well from the stagnant pool of candidates. So I would love to see more people of color, more women in particular of color, join forces, and let's get, you know, some of the data, speaking of it, from a shared collections at East that I saw. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yes, so the HBCUs did, there was a small program, I'm not going to describe it as well as I should, but there was a small program to look at the titles held, and I think it was some enormous percentage, like 60, 70% of the titles were unique to the HBCUs. So seeing that, I just thought, well, I wonder what Texas A&M has. I know they have, I studied Chicano culture, so I know they have quite a bit in that area, but there are lots and lots of these kinds of collections that don't get funded. So I would love to have, I don't know, lyricists or somebody create a project where we could encapsulate the collective collection. And for our local users, it would be beneficial if we could break copyright on the books from the 90s, because nobody owns them anymore, you can't find them, they're just invisible gray literature at this point, unless you have it in physical.
Yeah, we talked a little bit amongst ourselves about this idea of a shared collection, a national collection, and what does that actually mean? Like, if we're thinking about, you know, a perfect world for this sort of data-driven collection, is there a world in which we could have systems that were making recommendations based on, like, actually reading the book? Computers can read books now, guys, and they can tell us things about those books, right, if we ask them the right questions. Could we have systems where we were putting in those type of questions, like where is this book best suited, which library, and distributing books across our nation that way that can be shared? And we're talking primarily about print here today. If we're thinking about it like that, could we leverage some of the technology that we know is available and is out there, radically change the way we think about even approval plans, right? To be able to match the right books with the right places and then consider it a shared collection.
Yeah, thank you, all of you. You got your little approval plan. Sarah and I have a running thing. She has lots of thoughts about approval plans, and feel free to ask her about them after, because she can talk to you about it. I'm not, no. I'm your biggest fan about your thoughts on approval plans. As is always the case with these things, time is clicking fast, and so I'm going to skip one question and go to the next, the subject specialist collecting model, or the bibliographer model, as some people still call it, that was still prevalent in academic libraries in the 80s and 90s, was increasingly questioned and devalued in the decades that followed, and has been significantly hobbled or done away with in many academic libraries today. Was there value to that model? And what was lost with a movement away from it?
So, oh, sorry. Water bottles. So this model continues. It has not completely died. We still use this model at Stanford libraries in terms of the number of individual curators who are responsible for making decisions about every single thing that is collected in our library. The tension that I think we are starting to see more, and I'm sure others have already felt this, is their jobs are no longer just about making decisions about which print books should come in and where those print books should live. They now have to make decisions about media, about data sets, about weird newsletters, right, that are only available in a PDF and need to be put somewhere. So I think the number of things that have to be decided in terms of collecting has really expanded to the point that it's really untenable. So this job, I think, is changing, even if we want to stay in that type of model where a curator is making individual decisions about collecting.
I will agree and echo. So I think everyone could say this, right? My library is understaffed. My subject specialists teach, and they're very stressed, and a lot of them are fresh out of library school. They never learned selecting. They never learned collection development. They don't know any of the tools. We train them on Gobi, and they're like, ah. And so it's maybe 10% of their job. It stresses them out. We give them quotas. Those stress them out more. I feel so bad for them. And so every other month I throw what I call book buying parties, where I feed them and we sit down, and so we sort of buy books collaboratively. We talk about interdisciplinary strengths. Everybody kind of learns from each other, but like that's what we have to do to get these kids to buy books now. And I feel so bad, and I'm like, I could just do this for you, but like I also want them to learn, and I want them to learn the value of that process, and I want them to talk to their faculty about what they want. And so, you know, building those skills and those sort of communication and reaching out to your faculty, I think, is key. And also, you know, that if they don't learn it here, when are they going to learn it?
I would just add some context in terms of the bibliographers and book printing. The boom that happened was sort of, in my mind, and I could be wrong, please, I hope there's no historians here today. Post-World War II, economic boom, lots of people go to college, more and more just manufacturing of PhDs, people with master's degrees, and so that economy or that marketplace increases. At the time, the 1950s and 60s, most librarians, I think, were still male. And so with the transition, that's the devaluing, right? It's a female-dominated profession now. So anytime that happens, look at nursing, it gets devalued over time. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I think if you think about the impetus to print and go back to that, everybody knows this, right? So to get tenure, you have to publish. That system itself, it's built in and codified that we would then, and then there are the cottage industries around that created to bolster universities. And so some Stanfords are left collecting absolutely everything and trying to find a mountain where they can build the next storage facility. So.
Yeah, and can I just build on that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Just in terms of like the evolution of print book distribution in the US with these giant approval plans that were created in the post-war years to just like get information out and put into libraries. We have built technical services systems around that model, and it's really now difficult to move away from that model. And the number of books have not decreased. Like there is still a ridiculous number of print books, right, published every year. So we do in some ways have to maintain these robust technical services models with lots of staff to support that physical content, and yet we also need to do all of the other things that our users are asking for, APIs, scraping Facebook, right? Like all of that weird stuff that, gosh, I I wish that I had staff that could move from one place to another to do that, but we can't because we have this system that's built up to support this sort of antiquated way of just vacuuming up books. And so back to the idea of collective collections, like we do really wonder, are there other ways to think about this? Are there other ways to put staffing toward that type of collecting?
Yeah, I just want to follow up a little bit. We totaled up the number of years that we have working in libraries. It is a large, large number. And, I'm 27, and so, most of the years were theirs. But I wonder a little bit, getting back to something I think you said about younger librarians coming in who, and I've noticed this as well, both full disclosure, Emma used to be my boss. He used to work at Loyola University of Chicago. At Loyola and also at Brown, younger librarians, there's a real fear around the work of collecting. They feel uncomfortable about spending all of these dollars they've been given, and why buy these things. And when I first got a bunch of money that the university gave me to buy stuff, I stayed up for like 48 hours straight, just like buying stuff. I was like, oh yeah, this is it, man. I thought it was fantastic. But there is a real trepidation around it, a discomfort around, I think it has something to do with kind of dictating what should be available for people, which I find, fascinating. And so I wondered if you had, experienced that, and if you had any thoughts about it.
Can you repeat the last part about dictating?
Stayed up for 48 hours, just like buying stuff. I was like,
that you're the decider.
Yeah, they seem to have a problem being the decider, and a real discomfort around kind of, it seems like an imposition to them to be like, I chose this book and not this book. I chose these 5 and not that 5,
I think in a way that implies also that we, the assessors, are doing a lot more work than they probably think we're doing, which is where if you buy a book today or this year or last year, I probably will have no idea how it's circulating or being used for another 5 to 10 years, just because that tends to be, I wait to assess, I would say. But I get that, and I didn't select when I first got to Loyola, and now I took over for David. I'm doing fine arts, and it's the same thing. My background's in art history, and I'm like, I want to buy everything. But when I was in health sciences, I didn't care. It was all boring, and you got the dermatology textbooks, and it was horrifying, and yeah. So I also think it varies for the subject, but there is a reluctance with them, and I think it is that they've never had a sense of responsibility, and maybe feeling like they're failing their professors or us or their faculty or their students even.
They're not doing it well.
Yeah. Or also I think there's a lack of understanding at how much is actually already available through our aggregators, which is just so much.
All right. Right.
I do, yeah.
Sarah can. Yeah, Anna, please. And
Our selectors won't stop by.
oh, interesting. Right. This is a limited problem, apparently. So,
yes, depends on where you are.
Anna, go, and then just a word of.
Oh, okay.
Just a timing thing. We've got about 6 minutes left before we open it up to all of you and hear what you have to say.
Okay. I was just going to say that I think the approval plans are dictating by our choice what we get. There are bibliographers at the places that I'm trying not to mention where we get our books. There are those people, and I think if we could make a conscious effort to introduce new librarians to tech services, maybe not the one grumpy cataloger or whatever, but just the concept of metadata, and because I think they are pulled in too many directions. I think when they're in a classroom, they're supposed to be the dog and pony show. They're supposed to know everything about the resources they're showing, and they're the experts. Meanwhile, they've 2 years out of library school. I don't know how you become an expert in 2 years. Maybe some of them are, but it's just an impossible task. So I think solidarity and grace given to our younger colleagues is absolutely something to remind ourselves of. And I'm sorry your selectors won't stop selecting.
No, we love that. They're
Okay.
very fun.
Okay, I'm going to cherry pick a couple of questions, and we're going to have to go really fast to get through them. Just know that.
Lightning
We
round.
don't have to finish them all, right?
No, we don't have to finish them all, although they're all fantastic questions, and you wish we'd finish them all. So let's do this one. Has the concept of scholarly material become ossified? Was it always ossified? And become needlessly exclusionary? Was it always needlessly exclusionary?
Somebody has to start.
Nobody's touching that hot potato.
I know. I don't know about ossified or even needlessly exclusionary. I think about all of the different types of things that are being asked for and used in research now, and how quickly it feels like that has changed. And it doesn't quite feel like our profession has changed fast enough to accommodate that. I mean, I think I mentioned earlier, like, can we just scrape Facebook? Can you just give me an API for this thing? Why can't you subscribe to every single newsletter, right? And the things that we're asked to consider and as scholarly materials and things that should be preserved for future scholars is just so broad and so far-reaching. I kind of go back to, like, we can't continue to do this by ourselves. We can't continue to collect these things that are clearly scholarly material because somebody has said that they are, right? But we can't do it on our own and in local context. We have to be thinking about partnerships and how to share some of this load, because it's a lot.
This was my question, so I do think it is ossified. It always has been exclusive. It's a class-based system based on a feudal system. Now we're importing the feudal system into the capitalist system of the university. It's just a terrible fit. So that's all I have to say about that. Yes, it is.
I think, well, I mean, yes, but I also think there are even things that we're supposedly experts in buying, like books, which we're now occasionally unable to buy, which I find fascinating. It's like, how can I not buy this as an institution? I'm sure my students are all buying it too, right? But I still want it, and sometimes I can't, and I have to be sneaky, right? And like go around the rules. And so that I find frustrating, where it's like, this is the thing I'm supposed to be doing. I already can't do the new things that I'd really like to be doing, and now I'm sort of failing at doing some of the old things.
All right, thank you all. I won't follow up with a question, though I do have one. I like this last question. At what point does selection and collection become hoarding?
So I would say the moment is when we are unable to describe and offer access to the things that we have. Then we're starting to be in a situation of hoarding.
I agree.
Right.
I think when we become either unwilling or unable to share, that's sort of when it becomes hoarding, and it might not even be purposeful for us, but it translates that way into the world. And I know libraries that have willfully given up their sharing rights for like lower price caps because that's what they're forced to do, and you see this erosion of the idea of libraries as perpetual sharers and open to everyone, and it's difficult.
And I think we don't assess ourselves on how open our collections are, our print collections. That's not a metric that we use for success. And I think sometimes it shows in the way that we have assigned staffing to do things like resource sharing and interlibrary loan. Some places it's very, very small. Like, how could you actually share all of the things that could be shared when you're not allocating enough resources to do that? But we don't assess ourselves on that. We don't ask the question, how open is my collection?
Great, thank you all. Before I move out into the audience, And I do have a question, an initial question for the audience, and then we can talk about whatever the hell you want. But before we do that, just a quick lightning round here for the panelists.
A surprise.
Surprise lightning round. They know nothing about this. I was so bored on that airplane. If you had the space and money to buy and house everything, would you?
No.
Absolutely not.
No, I'd be a giant Starbucks.
That's
That's what my students want.
Is the camera getting that? Yeah. Okay.
Actually, can I say one more thing?
You absolutely can. Go ahead.
Emma and I were talking about this yesterday. Of like all of the ways we as libraries twist ourselves up into a pretzel because we think that people want this weird, like, shaped pretzel and it's going to appeal to everyone, but actually nobody has asked for a pretzel. Like, could we think about that?
Yes or no? In 10 years, AI will select the library books of most libraries.
Yes.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Sorry.
But in a good
We just
way,
gave up.
David.
We just gave
Not
up.
in a good way, because the metadata is going to suck. It's going to be awful. It already is awful. Anytime AI comes in and does metadata, it's garbage.
All
Sorry.
librarians will be fixing the metadata.
That's our job. That's our new job.
All
God,
we
you
do.
talk about a dystopia. In one word, who's the top priority when you're collecting?
You are, David. I'm sorry.
My faculty, for me. I like to think they still read.
One word.
Faculty.
Can I say 2 words?
Sure.
I think this is true. Future generations.
That's good. Are you going to stick with David?
Yes.
Okay, right on.
Thinking about it.
Are libraries doing enough to make their collections holdings known?
No.
No.
Again, we need more and better metadata. We need it free and open. What OCLC was supposed to be in the first place, free and open, made by librarians for librarians. It's our stuff. We made it. Can we just have it back, please?
We also need more staff.
Yes, to deal with the metadata, tech staff especially.
When you know peers have a title or titles, are you more or less inclined to collect it? That's actually a kind of a broader.
That's not a one-word question.
It depends
Fine,
on
okay,
the
skip
peer.
that. Can you erase that?
Erase that, strike it.
All right, right. Is your library getting collecting right?
This is my job
This
on the
feels
line,
very
David. Come
personal.
on. Yes, we're perfect. Well, I don't have to do the collecting myself. I have CBB as a group, so thankfully it's not just Colby, Bates, and Bowden, the trifecta of perfection in Maine. But we work so closely together. I mean, we're in each other's faces all the time. So I do think we're doing better than if I were just in charge.
All right, thank you. This last question, then the question for the audience. 20 years from now, well, that's a long time, will the majority of academic libraries buy print books?
I thought by now we'd have stopped, and I keep checking our numbers, and they're not going down because they're expensive, and like now the students don't want them, so it's fascinating. I keep waiting. I keep staring at that number. It's not going
It's not going
anywhere.
anywhere, yeah.
Well, 20 years, hopefully, I'll be dead, but we'll have a better version
We
of
don't
it.
want that, Anna.
You'll be retired.
I'll be somewhere in Mexico. So we'll have a better version of the Kindle, I guess. They've tried that a million times, but that's the only thing I can imagine. I really feel like a physical relationship with the word that you're reading is critical to how the human mind absorbs. I'm just making stuff up, but I really think this is true.
Yes, this is a lovely panel of us just making things up, and it's okay. We've embraced it. But I do think, as Anna just said, like the monograph is not going away because that's the way we talk about very complex issues, and those issues are not going away. It's the way we talk about interdisciplinary ideas and put those out into the world. And also, the tenure and reward system is probably not going away anytime soon. Maybe in 20 years it will look different, but for now, I think it's sticking around.
I had another question to lead us out into the audience, but I think I'm going to ask that same question of the audience. I don't remember what it was. 20 years from now, will the majority of academic libraries buy print books?
Please raise your hands, because we need to capture this gold.
There's no pressure there.
Deliver.
All right. Well, can I also add a comment too to that? I mean, and a question too. So I say yes, I agree. I think it's not about the monograph, though. I think the monograph, yes, will stay. And I think it's only until ebooks get better, and they could be shared better, and they don't get downloaded by chapter and so forth. In an ideal world, I'd have both, honestly, but none of us can afford to have both of those. I think one thing, and just as my general comment about collecting, getting it right, I think we put too much pressure on ourselves about some of this, honestly. I think we have a little bit of vocational awe, in a way, about this, that we're getting right. I think it's almost a question you can't be answered. I feel that the best measure of all of this is, can we get what we want for our users locally? I understand there's some options for preservation in the libraries. That's one of the main roles we have. But moving from access to from ownership to access, I think is something we have to embrace and understand that. Are our users satisfied with that? Of course, sometimes we have to say no to some of those sort of things as well, in addition. And the last thing I'll say is I share, as someone who came from academia without an MLIS, been working in collections for 20 years, and when I got a budget to buy books, I was like, oh my God, yes, this is amazing. So it just boggles my mind that folks don't like to do that. But I think you're right. There are a lot of reasons behind that. I think it's someone I just mentioned, the feel that they're making too many decisions about that. And the last thing, the very last thing I'll say is that I think also we as librarians also need to keep in mind that we have networks and that we have things and I agree with all of that. And I'm so glad actually that you mentioned the tech services stuff, because there's a cost of stewardship about everything. It's not the price of the book, it's all about how we get the book into the hands of the person. So 100,000% about tech services. And collections people, love your tech services people, absolutely essential. There used to be a time when we would just hand them stuff. I think now they need to be part of the conversation about how to make this stuff available, the best way to do it, and they have expertise.
Great, thank you. So many hands, so little time.
Okay, so
No. That was the gold that we were looking for.
someone who was back there who went first.
So Karen Wyckoff, head of tech services at Ithaca College Library. I would say that our students do not read books unless they are forced to. And the faculty, and that means the faculty has to have assigned it. And they realize that they're fighting an uphill battle, and they are assigning book reading less and less. We are ordering fewer books, and our users are using fewer books. And we're doing, for the first time, like a massive weeding of our collection. And I hope nobody's like out in the parking lot looking at how much stuff is going in the dumpster, because those services that will, Better World Books, and that, they've gotten really tight about what they'll take. And if it's older, forget it. A lot of stuff is just going into recycling. So in 20 years, will we still be buying books? My answer is, I hope so, because I really worry about a world in which so-called educated people do not have the capacity to read books and understand complex issues that cannot be explained in an article or a soundbite.
Thank you.
Thank you up there.
We will be out at your dumpster, by the way, with a camera later, now that we know.
Hi, Bridget Mescal, the Collection Assessment and Development Librarian at SUNY Brockport. Awesome panel, thank you. I think that print books are imperative to certain fields of study, such as art, right? I talk a lot with my art faculty, and they're like, we would prefer that you collect most of the things that we want in a tangible, format that we can interface with. This being said, art is a traditionally devalued field of study. So in 20 years, if it continues to be devalued, then yes, I think we won't be purchasing print books in 20 years, right? But if we do something about that, like valuing the arts or like more feminine things in life, right? I think that we will still be purchasing books for those specific needs and those specific subject areas. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We have 20 years to change the values of our society, so you might want to get started as soon as
Hop
this is
to
over.
it.
We got another one over here.
Hi, I'm Samantha Bishop Simmons. I'm the humanities librarian at the University of Kansas, and I'm one of those new babies who is just fresh out of library school. I'm not afraid, but I am like confused by the different ways that data contradicts itself, and I wondered if you all, in your 200 years of collective experience, could answer.
400.
What do you do?
190 here, 10 here.
What do you do when usage data contradicts the other kinds of data that you've been talking about, which is largely what faculty are telling you to buy? When faculty, and again, I'm a humanities librarian, so there's definitely these emotional stories about how we use materials, or I'll get some real weird feedback like, well, I use that to teach, like somehow that's like a separate thing, then they're, I don't know, 2 different budgets. What do you do when you are confronted with all of these different things that are numerical, but you're still getting information from your faculty that is maybe like existentially important to them and not captured in that data? Like you want to buy what they tell you, but then you say they haven't checked it out in like 5 years.
Yeah, that's a great question.
So at Colby, we just buy it. We just get it. It's not about the data. It's about a personal relationship, and it's about creating a space where, should the library ever, it hasn't in my 10 years at Colby, be asked to lower the budget or give up some monies for the college, then you know that you have those faculty on your side. At Colby, we're considered faculty. I don't know why, because we still work in the summer. I don't like that. But what I would say is don't worry about it. If you have the money to support a humanities field, please do. Like the sciences, I love science librarians and librarianship, but the sciences get most of the budget at Colby. So I would say just to be pleasant, maybe make them take you out for coffee, have a conversation about, is it really existential? Are you saying that you're gonna use it? Because if not, it's a 45-volume set. Can we please move it to the storage annex or whatever? But have that conversation, because you'll be surprised at what you learn from something that you think you know about. And I'm just recently experienced that too, so.
This happened to me recently. I canceled a favored database of a very powerful, loud faculty member in the history department. All right, I'm cold-hearted. I was medical libraries. I was like, oh, I got used 14 times, dead to me. And this man came for me, as he should, with like affidavits from his students swearing that they had, it was obvious these kids were just using Google, right? And he had insisted they use this and no one was using it. And so I did resubscribe to it, but I'm also like, I let him know, I was like, I'm watching this for 2 years, and if the numbers don't change, it's gone. And he was like, fair enough. He didn't actually say fair enough. He was still really mad.
I hate you.
But I was like, that's how it is. But it's hard because it was like his baby, and it was his ideal that the students would have to use this purely, bibliographic. It was not a full text database. But he's like, this is how they learn. And I was like, this is clearly not how they're learning.
I think you hit on something really important and why I think it's really difficult for us to assess our collections, which is that collecting is actually very relational. Primarily, in fact, the vendor that you choose to work with is often based on a relationship, no matter what you put on your sole source justification form or your RFP, right? At the end of the day, how we collect is really relational, and that makes it really hard to put data to it.
Time for 1 or 2 more questions, David.
Wow, time flies, folks, and you've been fantastic. I see a couple of hands, and
So two?
Does anybody up top here?
That's what I
wanna
was gonna
Yeah,
say.
because there's a bunch of folks up here.
I will run up there if I see a hand up
Yeah.
as the final question.
Yeah, it's like a rogues gallery up there. Yeah.
Okay.
No. You're all rogues to me.
Okay. We have a question there, and then we'll take one more after that, and we'll be on time.
Hi, I'm Robinson from Iowa State, Director of Collections and Open Strategies, and I was going to answer the question David asked about. Yes, I think we're still going to be collecting print books, although I agree with the gentleman in the front who spoke first about, at least at a large public university, it's just in time, not just in case kind of collecting. But I'd like to think, with my open strategies hat on, that a lot of our print books will be print on demand from open access books. That's the future I think is possible, not probable, but possible.
Yeah, next year we're going to do an all-day thing here because we had a lot of questions about open that we just didn't have time to get into. Yeah.
Okay, last question right over here.
No, I haven't given up on you. Okay. We'll figure it out. We're going to sort it. Yeah.
So I don't come from academic universities anymore. I'm at a government library. And so I think that the possibility that we will go back to physical books is actually really high because there's a huge cybersecurity risk with digital books. There's no protections on them right now. And we are concerned, my counterintelligence department is concerned about foreign adversaries looking at what are we reading, how long are we spending on particular areas, on particular topics. And so we are looking at it from a security standpoint, and I expect that we would see more of that among scientists and researchers.
Wow.
But my question for the panel is, if we do use generative AI or AI technologies to dictate our collections or where collections live, do you think that that has the potential to create a more significant divide between institutions, like you already mentioned HBCUs versus predominantly white universities have different collections? Do you think that the computer would not see those as, well, we need to increase this diversity, but we need to reinforce it instead?
As a Chicana woman, I will say yes. Technology has never been our friend. It has always divided us. And some people say it's not the gun, it's the untrained gun holder or whatever. It's technology. It divides us every day, all the ways. So yes, I think if AI is used, it creates poor metadata, but also divisions between different kinds of universities, because you have to think about who's going to afford to be able to enhance the crappy AI version of a plan. If you don't have the people there, then it's hand selecting, which maybe is better in the end.
Yes, +1.
Agreed. I could see me owning nothing but books on Jesuit, right? Because I'm a Jesuit college. It's like, you can come here, but this is all you can study. This is all you get.
All right. Last question.
Okay, so I did have a question. I'm Shara from Santa Clara University. My question was for Emma, actually. So the book buying party, the issue that we've been having is that a lot of our librarians are not doing collection development. There's one that's doing a lot of collection development, but the rest are doing zero. And we're always scrambling at the end of the year to like buy everything. How is that working for you? Are you finding that they're getting more comfortable? Because, you know, I was talking to my assistant dean right before lunch actually about this very topic, and he was saying he thinks a lot of it has to do with uncomfortability, but they've also told me, I just don't have time. And I'm like, regardless, I need you all to do this because I'm seeing that you're not buying and I'm having to pick up the slack, and I'm just the collection specialist. I'm not even a librarian, and I'm buying. So it's an issue.
They're very fun, and you know, it's a party, but really it's a set amount of time. It's 3 hours when they have to sit there and buy books, and so they get it done, you know, and they're being fed. And they're so cute because they'll start like competing with each other. So we have competitions. It's like who can buy the most books, who can spend the most money, you know, like who can go over budget, which they love doing. And I'm like, you're not going to get in trouble, because they're so worried they're going to, like, someone's going to, I'm like, I don't yell at people. Like, no one's going to yell at you if you go over budget. So it does sort of make it into a game, and it makes it more fun and accessible. And I think really it's having the multiple people there, camaraderie. They don't feel like they're in a vacuum. As soon as they have a question, they're like, Gobi looks like it's from 1981. I don't know what this is. And so we'll be like, yes.
I hope there's nobody from Gobi here.
No, we love Gobi. Mosaic is coming to save us.
The socks are great too. The Mosaic socks, if you haven't picked them up.
I think that was the last question we have time for. I want to thank you all very, very much for being here. You were fantastic. I just want to give a couple of quick shout outs. First to Jude, who has been, give it up for Jude, because Jude, you were amazing, and thank you so much. And to my friends in the back who were dealing with the audio, and I came in and the setup was weird and all of that. You took care of it, and we really appreciate it. Thank you so much.